Funny. Okay, well, thanks again for coming. I wanted to start with a quote that I came across from the author of a game that we're going to play kind of towards the middle. I think I've mentioned the game to a bunch of you. It's called the Death Deck. It's a stack of cards, yes, with lots of prompts on this subject. My children hate it when they see it because I love to play.
They're warming up to it.
They're warming up.
We need to get you different fun games.
I know.
We have those too. But.
I know. I'm not fun at all. But anyway, she writes, with a passionate belief that peace at the end begins with meaningful conversations over time. I feel the more we engage in talking about this difficult subject, the more prepared and ultimately comforted we will be when we reach the end of life. So that was her impetus in creating the game. And I think that ties in nicely with sort of my main point of this. You know, I am sensitive to everything that's going on in our own congregation about this issue. And even as I was planning this night, I thought, maybe this is not the right time for a conversation like this, but that's kind of exactly the point. There is never a good time to talk about this. It's always easier to kind of kick it down the field a little bit, and so I thought, well, I'll just do it anyway and we'll see how it goes. But I am sensitive to the fact that this is a topic that many of us, it's very near to our personal experience. So feel free to go as deep or not deep as you want to today in your own sharing. The reality is we are up against some powerful cultural influences that push us hard to experience any kind of decline as negative, as embarrassing, as something that we should try and avoid if we can and hide if we can't. So that impacts our putting off of conversations. It puts off our own planning. And I feel like our faith, our Christian faith, really elevates relationships of dependence and interdependence, the returning after a season of being apart to coming together and caring and nurturing relationships. I think the image of the body of Christ tells us that we aren't meant to handle everything we experience by ourselves. So I feel like our faith can really balance this topic, but like I said at the beginning, we most often have, or very often have, these kind of conversations in the clinical setting when we're in a crisis. The impetus for this conversation is just that I hope this can be one first tiny step forward in bringing these two competing things in our ears together a little bit more, and we can unearth together how we're feeling, what we're hoping for, what we expect, and what we fear, and then we'll go from there. Again, there's no experts here. I'm not an expert, and we all have personal experiences of loss, so there's no right or wrongs, there's no wise or immature. These exercises are all about discovering what's inside of us and getting it out into the open. So we're going to start with that sharing about whatever little memento that you brought that represents a person that you've lost. So feel free to share about the person, who they were to you, and then if there's anything you'd like to share about their passing that was impactful to you, feel free to share that as well. Would anyone like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, thanks, Renee.
Well, I was going to share. I didn't have to remember to bring it. It's my little tattoo here. And when we were in the process of going to pick up Ellie, before we left, I said to my mom, what do you want to be called? Because there were no other grandkids. She was the number one grandkid and the only grandkid. So my mom said, well, I'd like to be called Grandmother Opal. And I thought, oh my Lord. And as we found out, Ellie could not speak very well. She couldn't say her R's and her L's, so she was Ellie Boyles. So Grandmother Opal would not have been workable. But anyway, I often call my mom Opal, or Ope, and Ellie, in her little infant ears, heard Apple. So that was her name, Apple. And a few years, this was after she had passed, I said to Ellie, why don't we get tattoos of apples? And she thought that was a good idea.
You're the coolest.
Oh yeah, I am. Yeah, I was amazed that I even suggested that.
Me too.
Yeah, but I think I'd read it somewhere and thought, oh, that's a cute idea. So anyway, we agreed we're gonna do that. Well, Ellie, with Amber, and I know several of you remember Amber, she went and got her tattoo first. I was thinking both of us would go together and get it. And she got hers first, and it wasn't exactly kind of the apple I wanted. It kind of had to look more like a heart, but anyway, it was supposed to be an apple. And then I went and got mine on my mother's birthday. And Ellie went and got another tattoo, one of many that she now has. And so this is my apple, and the two little leaves, one is 13, which is the year she passed, and 14, which is the year she was born. So that's always with me. And I will tell you, I had it refreshed maybe about a year after I got it done, and it hurt more to get it refreshed than it does.
Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, so in case you're thinking about getting your tattoo refreshed, it's gonna hurt more. So anyway, that was my
Thanks, Renee.
my memento.
I've got two.
Okay.
I've told all of you about my necklace. This is Roger's thumbprint. And I got one of these for me and for my two Mahana daughters. And the three of us are sharing that time. We did everything together in preparation. They were over, I'm sorry. But Katie was a Cub fan, so no White Sox. So she would come over from Indiana and we'll watch the World Series together, and we were just very close, and so they remained very close. But the other thing I brought was Quirkle, and when I first met him, he invited me over to his place after church, and Carrie was there. They met for lunch every Sunday, and they played Boggle and Quirkle. Now, Raj doesn't do a lot of reading, but he was phenomenal at Boggle. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm not to be outdone, so I really worked hard. And after about 4 years, Raj and Carrie refused to play with me.
Oh, that's great.
But we played Quirkle, and Carrie would come over every week and we'd play it. Raj and I, when COVID started, we didn't get out for 5 years. And we played Quirkle at least once a day.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes twice. Because he'd look at me and says, you wanna go to the table? I'll meet you there. And it's an upgrade from Domino's. It's really fun. But we got to trash talking. I mean, oh my gosh. We really got into each other. Not mad, but we were just always trying to pull the other's leg. And we got to laughing so hard over that. And then Katie had taken a picture of Raj when we were playing, and he's laughing so hard he's crying. His little slits in his eyes, and he's crying. And I took that and I put it on a canvas and I put it in my bedroom. That's the first thing I see when I wake up, his smiling face. And that reminds me of what the memories that we had with, now I can't play this anymore. Carrie can't play it anymore. But it holds such precious memories. He would laugh so hard.
Oh, thank you, Kay. That's a really good one.
So I brought a ring from my grandma, Shelto, which if you've been to storytelling, you've heard me talk about my grandma. It's kind of an ugly ring. It's very bold, just like she was. And she loved the Black Hill gold, so I have all of that. But specifically about my grandma, what I, in her later years, as she started to lose her sight and some of the privileges that come, like driving, and then eventually her boyfriend passed and she had to downsize to an apartment. And I mean, those were all opportunities, those were all moments of loss for her, but it didn't take long for her to recover from each sort of sidestep and just find a way to live into her own way of being bold in that new setting and such. And when her heart health, she had a couple cardiac events, and she was actually came to Meadowbrook, and her final months, she was maybe it's because of her nurse background or her daughter being a nurse or me being who I am, but we understood what her wishes were about additional measures and care, and even though I know she didn't want to spend her last few months in a hospital bed, she we honored her wishes, and she passed in her sleep, and I can still, she was in control still.
Yeah.
And that was a gift that she gave to us in her willingness to talk about those end of life decisions in such a really clear manner. So I think it's certainly what Bruce and I try to do with one another now. So.
Well, I brought a knife. It was, I remember the day that my father received it, and he received it from his grandmother. It belonged to his grandfather. And I remember the day I was 5 or 6 years old. I remember vividly him receiving it and how important it was to him to be connected, because his own father died in an auto accident that my dad was also in when he was 3 years old. And so he didn't know his father, so his grandfather was very important. But it just struck me, trying to choose something, even to who to talk about, not talking about the 4 immediate family members who died very close together, but talking about my father who died 40 years ago, and about the idea that he was very humble and said very little. He was just didn't use words, and was not critical of things. He just didn't say much. So I know almost nothing about his early life. But the idea that he passed along something that he had received, and that seemed really typical of him, that he didn't have a lot in his life. And the children received nothing when our parents died, because it all went to medical expenses. But the idea that this is what I have, so this is yours, and he had given this to me. So it was very meaningful in that way. But that idea of he passed along what he received.
Well, I'm wearing a brooch that my grandmother Teeman, my mom's mom, gave to me. She gave me all of her costume jewelry at some point. She lived with us for about 6 years of my childhood, and she trained to be a nurse in the 1930s that took care of babies in the hospital. So I've felt very near to her in the last weeks as I've gone around the NICU units and held babies, and really thought of her. She had a stroke when she moved out of our house, and she was living in like an assisted living type apartment, and she had a little buddy system with her friends on the floor, and they would come and knock on each other's door in the morning, and that's how it was discovered that she'd had a stroke. And she didn't really recover from that, but one thing I appreciated about that was the friendships that she had on the floor, and how she and her little friends really looked after one another, took care of each other, and they had great relationships, and that was wonderful for me to see as her granddaughter. So it's her brooch.
I didn't bring a remembrance of my older brother. Some of you actually knew Dick, but for those who didn't, he was a surgeon in Bloomington, a general surgeon. He had about a 5-year battle with prostate cancer. Turned out to be metastatic. That is, he died more of bone cancer cancer than anything else, I guess you can say. But being a surgeon, the way he first approached this was quite interesting, I think, in the sense that he went over to a specialist in Indianapolis and begged this other surgeon to do a relatively painful, more aggressive surgery than normally would be performed on anybody in trying to get a surgical cure, if you will, not only taking out areas that were cancerous, but also working on lymph nodes to a very aggressive extent. And of course, what happened in the aftermath is that he had just a very painful recovery from this, but still had a PSA. If you don't know PSA, it's been largely, I guess you could say, downplayed now if you don't have stage or whatever cancer, but if you have your prostate removed, the PSA should go down to 0. And if it doesn't, you got some problems. And of course, his did not. He then went out to the national expert at Johns Hopkins out in Baltimore, and this gentleman basically told, this was over a period of years here now, this is, I'm trying not to drag it out too much, but he was told by the national, maybe international expert, says, what you got is at a molecular level. It's not going to be something you can remove surgically. And that's not what Dick wanted to hear, of course. But there would be some hope of radiation, chemotherapy kinds of issues. Well, of course, he tried some of that, but it wasn't working. And Dick made his own decision to be in hospice care. And what was interesting to me when you mentioned how this is often done in a clinical setting, it rings very true. I was there in the hospital when Dick had, I think, as many as 3 different doctor colleagues come by to visit him, and he broke the news to them that he was going to be in hospice care. And to see the looks on their faces. Dick died at the age of 64, and it was, are you sure? Dick saying, this is, most of them knew that he'd gone through some real travails. But Dick made this decision completely on the basis of how he felt this was proceeding, and that it came as a surprise to his medical colleagues, I thought was the most interesting thing to me. Many of whom really did know what he'd been going through. So.
And your brother was a person of faith, right, with you?
Oh yes,
yeah,
he
that's
was.
What I remember you saying.
He actually, after he retired, when he knew he had this fairly uncurable form of prostate cancer, it actually, he had actually already been studying for his, he was going to renew his professional tests and so on, that, you're not just, a physician, but you're also, what is the right term here, to take the board exams and to renew them. And he was thinking, what am I doing? Why should I be? And that was the first step in his view, to just say, look, I need to do something while I still can, and it probably isn't being a surgeon. I have a few months left on that. I mean, he didn't have to redo that in order to continue practicing. But he made the decision at that point. He still had about 2 years left. We didn't know how much, but it turned out to be that. And he became an associate minister at First Christian Church Bloomington, a licensed minister. Not, he could perform weddings and funerals and things like this, but he was not an ordained minister. And largely was doing it because the staff at that time was not paying any attention to the local community things. It's the point where, I don't want to name names or anything, but neither of the professional ministers even subscribed to the Daily Pantograph. It came as big news to them if somebody in the congregation has actually been in the newspaper. And Dick said, well, and of course, he also didn't feel, that's his personal view, that they were at the hospitals nearly enough when someone was in the hospital. And if there's anybody with access to the hospitals in Bloomington Normal, my brother was chief of staff at ProMen for a time. And trust me, he could get anywhere, whatever, he could get in rooms that no one else could. Probably easier than clergy could, regular clergy. So he actually spent the last year and a half of his useful professional life as a licensed minister and associate minister at First Christian Church Bloomington, where I'd grown up, as the person who was kind of the community connector. I don't think it was really in his title, but I think that describes it. We've had, such positions, but it was desperately needed. And he took over quite a bit of the hospital calling too.
Neat.
I didn't bring memento, and I guess if I would have, it would have been a crocheted Afghan for my grandmother that everybody in our family had, which is a lot. But my grandmother was always, she's quiet, not quiet maybe, but not real effusive. But she gave me goals. One of my first goals in life was I wanted to carry 2 5-gallon buckets of water. Because that's what she did every morning. She'd go out and fill these, and when you're 5, 6 years old, that's pretty amazing. And take them out to the chickens, right? So that was those kind of things. And she always went to Grandma's house. She was always working. Not that it was, you had to do that. That's just what everybody did. She always had a big garden, and so through the entire time, she lived on her own until the very end, and. So the garden, instead of being 2 acres, maybe became like a small patch, but she still would be out there. And actually, after she passed, we had a day where the whole family got together and everybody could pick something out that they wanted. And after it was all over, my dad's like, come back here. And he said, Grandma was making this Deb was about 6 months pregnant for your child, and so I know she wanted them to have it, so here's what you're gonna get. And just like right up to the end, and she just always was doing that, and that's what I remember.
What a precious gift.
Now, somehow I didn't see the directions for bringing mementos, but sorry. I would say, after Bruce said that, the quilts were most important to me for my grandmother, because she made them for multiple ones for everybody. And I'm sorry that I grew up where these were blankets, they were used, so nothing is in pristine condition, to save. I have one or two that are in decent condition, but some of the fabrics are worn. And also a crazy quilt that she had made, and not backed, I think it needed finishing. And a piece from a great-grandmother who I never knew. But, I got one for my 16th birthday, and then for our wedding. And so we always had quilts around, that's what she did.
As I reflected on this a bit today, I just was shocked that there's these different circles of relationships. You've got your really close people in your life that are, as each of you all are reflecting on family members, and I don't have anybody in that circle that has died that I really knew very well. So my parents, both of them, have very estranged relationships with their parents. Never really knew grandparents that well, never really knew uncles. So it was very nuclear. My parents are still living, my sister's still living. so I just was kind of shocked a bit that I don't know anyone, you know, in my family, and then it made me really nervous because I was like, well, it's coming, you know, at some point in time. But the person that came to my mind was a man named Bob Van Zanti, who was our staff trainer when we came on board with the Navigators 20 years ago up in Madison, Wisconsin. He and his
Like
family.
30 years ago now.
How many years ago?
I don't know, but it's more than
I think it was 20 years ago. We'll go with that.
more than
You think that way, go for it.
In that space, kind of a staff trainer was kind of like a Jedi Padawan learner kind of relationship, a mentor, someone that you process things with, that you just lived life very close to. And Bob had relocated from Purdue to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where we did our first assignment with the Navs, and so he moved in order to be there with us. And within the first year or so of being on campus together, he was diagnosed with brain cancer, and it went fast. So we watched him go down in a year and a half or so. And there are a couple of things about that were just shocking and gripping to me. Number one, I remember the day. This was just a confident person, someone that had big faith, and I just watched fear in his eyes when he just shared about his own mortality that was coming. And it was, you know, had all the right, you know, confident answers, if you will, and big faith, but he was just terrified. And then just being able to be alongside of him during those years of practical service. His family, his two sons, were on assignment in other parts of the world with Bible translating efforts and missionary work in Japan and the Philippines. And so we were kind of the kids there that were taking care of him and his wife practically. And so I just, it was just a profound, you know, we went kind of thinking that we knew what our training experience was going to look like. And from day one, it was really about watching someone try to figure out how to walk with God in the midst of a very messy kind of thing. And my memento from Bob are these grapes. It's a little awkward, but Bob was a connoisseur of grapes. He would throw them in the freezer and eat them frozen. Anybody like that? They're like sweeter that way, I think. And he was so passionate about grapes, he said, you never buy grapes when they're expensive. When you see the grapes at $1 at that point in time, 99 cents, 79 cents, he's like, that's when you know to go buy, you know, grapes. So these were $1.29 at Aldi, which is pretty good for 2024.
Well, the part of your story that resonates with me, Ben, is that when you find yourself being the person that's there, and you're wondering, you know, how do you deal with that when the other family members aren't? So the memento I brought, which might be because I forgot to bring my memento, but is my phone, which is interesting because I've always had a love-hate relationship with having a cell phone. I've resisted it for a really, really long time, but I cannot imagine having gone through it without it. And so Valerie and I were the ones calling the son and the daughter that were both in Washington, and neither of them had been to see him recently, and so it was just important that we get them on the phone with him every day, but he wasn't able to communicate. I mean, it happened so quickly from the time that we got to the hospice center. And then the other part of it was that I had to use the phone all the time, was that mom can't retain anything. So we were taking pictures and we had to tell all of the staff, please don't think we're documenting this in any way because we're suspicious of you or anything that you're doing, but mom won't remember what happened today. And so, you know, if he's being fed or if he's putting up a peace sign and, you know, this sort of thing, you know, we were taking pictures all the time, and she would, you know, get worried that maybe nobody had been taking care of us, and no, this is your CNA that keeps coming in, so that she could review them at the end of the day. And even now, how much the phone is her lifeline in trying to get through the grief process, and then how much it is a detriment because it decides what you're going to see, and so it'll put things up that really aren't helpful to her. So just trying to navigate all of that has just been an interesting part of it. But it was profound to me that the phone could facilitate healing for the parent-child relationship for both of his kids in his last days. Which, his daughter reading poetry to him when he was no longer able to be understood, but he was vocalizing, and that he definitely could hear her. And so just having it was so important, which was a surprise.
Well, thank you so much for everyone sharing. Did everybody get a chance to share? Okay. Well, I wondered if we could, reflecting on our stories collectively, if there are any aspects of the person you mentioned and their passing that went exactly as they would have hoped for or you had hoped for as you reflect on the circumstances that surrounded their death. Did anyone have experiences where things happened just as they hoped?
I would think my grandma did, because I honestly think that she just said, I'm tired of living, so I'm not gonna do it anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't anything necessarily an acute thing. I think she really just said, okay, it's enough, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, wow.
I think that's true for my dad too, that he decided not to continue treatments after over a year. And he was in a hospital bed in the front room, next to the living room of our house. So he could see outside and see the grade school across the street. But when it came time to die, he had gone to the hospital, which had a hospice unit. And all 6 of the children and my mom were all able to be with him when he died. And that was about 2 o'clock in the morning, but it was just meaningful for all of us to be there together. And the last thing he said to us was he apologized for not giving us more financially.
Well, on the flip side, in any of the experiences you mentioned, did anything happen that, of course, we can't control all these variables as they unfold, but was there any part of any of these passings that didn't go as the person had hoped or you had hoped?
No.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know if this was it wasn't a hoped or not hoped for, but growing up and even up until the last days, whenever I was going somewhere, my mom would always say, now, let me know when you get there. And I got so tired of calling her and telling her, okay, I'm here, Mom. And
Call me when you get home.
yeah, call me when you get home. Call me when you get home. But as a dutiful daughter, 99.9% of the time I did it. And so when the end was coming, I said to her, Mom, tell me, let me know when you get there. And she passed, and nothing happened. I didn't get a sign. And the day of the funeral, we were driving down to the burial, and I told my cousins about it. And she, when we got out of the car, my cousin ran over to me and said, "Look up at the sky." And there was a big O in the clouds. And I thought, she's told me she got there.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a good story.
I didn't want to say, now tell me when you get there and where you're at. I felt like I knew where she was going to be, but it was just this big O in the clouds. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I thought, there's my sign. She got there.
Yeah.
the most obvious thing that was not the way Ralph wanted things to go is that he did not want to go back to the hospital. He wanted to die at home. And that was frustrating for him, but when he realized once he got there that that's where he was going to die. He was always just such a gentleman. And he looked at the three of us, my mom and my sister and me, and said to the CNA, "There's some pretty smart cookies here," because we had said going to an appointment.
Oh,
He knew. No, this had all been discussed 3 times, but he couldn't retain it. And so that the morning of, in getting him in the car, you know, it was, where are we going? It's that appointment we talked about. And then once we got there, he became alert and knew what it was. But then he was lovely about it. He accepted that this was what was going to happen.
I think, my grandma would have, she died in her sleep, which I think is probably what most of us would like to have happen. But there was still uncertainty whether she was going to be in a nursing home long term. And if we had known, she wasn't there very long. So if we'd known it was going to be really short, I don't know, there might have been other options that we would be able to keep her at home. But at the time you're making decisions for, this could be 2 years, this could be 3 years, you know, and so, that's what you wish you knew when you're making those decisions.
I remember us having that exact same conversation. Valerie would start to cry and say, he may be gone in 48 hours, can we just tough it out and keep him here? But the flip side of it was, he may be gone in 48 hours with a broken spine because we cannot keep him in bed. And so it's so hard to meet some of these issues.
Well, Raj and I spent 13 years getting acquainted with each other because that's how long we were married. And he didn't have relationships that cared about him. They never asked about his doctor's appointments. And so he just took care of himself. And when I got involved, I pushed my way in and said, I need to know. We're a team. And when he caught on to that reality, then the last 5 years he would have panic attacks. And he'd say, okay, and he'd tell the doctor or he'd tell Carrie, he said, Kay can calm me down. Kay can calm me down. And he really looked to me for that. And he was afraid of being in a lot of pain because he was in pain. And I said, I will see that you aren't in pain. And I wasn't able to do that because he went so quickly. He was in hospice 2 days.
Oh my.
And I was chasing nurses down after writing down the time that he'd gotten his last meds. You're 15 minutes late. He's climbing out of the bed. He's thrashing about. Please come. Once we got him on hospice with transitions, they had a nurse stay with him all night long with me. And they had a night nurse that would come and check on it, and she went and talked to the nurse. And then he was fine. But I wrestled him for 14 hours one night. And they said there was nothing they could do. And then I find out, they had 24/7 on-call person they could call. And they didn't. And I didn't keep my promise. That's been my biggest regret.
Well, what you shared, Kay, is such a good example of these variables in this process that are so often out of our control, even though we would love to be the ones that were in charge of the pain medications or the hospice arrangements and all of that. But often all we can do is have kind of an intention towards the process. And I feel like, as I mentioned before, a crucial first step in beginning to develop some intentions towards the process is understanding our own values and beliefs. And so many of them have already come to the surface as we've had a conversation. But the game that I mentioned, the death deck, is another tool for kind of uncovering some of those beliefs. So I thought we'd do just one round. As I mentioned in my email, I pre-separated them into like, easy, medium, and like really hard. So you, depending on your comfort level, you tell me which kind of card you would like.
Tolerance?
What's your spice tolerance? And we'll try this out.
One of my Indian neighbors over here said, "What's your spice tolerance?" And it's like, an American spices?
That is the right question to ask.
Bruce, you want to start us off?
I'll start us off. I'll
Okay.
go medium.
Medium, okay.
Ooh.
Medium.
That's usual.
Okay, this is medium. Now this might feel, it was according to me, so I apologize if it's more or less.
This is a trick question. Okay. If your spouse died, which article of his or her clothing would you keep? Which one would you be glad to never see again?
Wow.
Wow.
It's got a little heat to it.
Yeah.
I know. So this is tough because I don't pay that much attention to things, you know, like sometimes it's like, cause she has a lot of rotating going on. There's things that have been there a long time that she's like, I've had this for this long. I'm like, really? Let's see. You know, if there's something I was gonna keep, it'd probably be a pair of her pajamas that she had that I remember and for a long time.
And I wear for 14 hours a day.
The ones I'm thinking of, maybe not so much, but I don't know if there's anything that I would not be glad to see again, because usually if there's something, I don't know, it gets rotated out somewhere.
Yeah, she's always fashionable. Thank you. Okay, Chris, how are you feeling?
I'll go medium also.
Okay, well that's my
Middle of the road person.
That's
Tiny.
not
Want me to hold it for you?
Almost there. Name and explain one personal item that rightfully belongs in your in your post-mortem shrine. A personal item that rightfully belongs in your post-mortem shrine.
That's a medium one?
So that's an
according to Jess.
Be careful of these difficult ones then.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's actually hard because I have a lot of stuff, but there's not really like a thing that.
Is there anything you can think of your children really wanting to see, like next to your picture and your, I don't know, something they would remember you by?
Why don't you draw another one? I'll take that one. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I'm not allowed.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, you are. We're making rules as we go.
I would have put your garden gloves.
Well, I was gonna say, like, there's not like not like an item. I go through stuff. I mean, my gardening.
There's about 8 pair. Which one?
Oh, yes, that's the truth.
But I thought gardening too. So.
Well, my favorite weeding thing he ran over with a lawnmower the last week.
Oh shoot.
Oh.
Now we're into marriage counseling.
Yes, we do.
That would have been it.
DIY. If you could plan your own celebration of life party, where would it take place and what would be the theme? Well, that's so easy. Composting would be the theme, and it would be on the homestead.
Okay.
Absolutely.
No surprises there.
No surprise. That's very easy.
Okay.
That was the easy one. So you got
You wanna do that,
We
Ethan?
should get around
Yeah,
it,
she's
but
not-
You can do that.
She's not allowing me to just take.
I figured it'd be a trumpet.
Well,
There
okay,
you
go
go.
ahead now, they're ready to hear.
Well, you know, that's interesting.
but you're wrong.
Well, it wasn't the first thing that popped into my head,
Mm.
which were the textbooks that I've helped write.
Aw.
But I like your idea better, actually, now I think about it.
What about a trumpet on textbook?
Yeah, a pile
Yeah,
of your
a
textbooks
pile
with
of
a
them.
trumpet standing up on
Yeah,
it.
there you go.
Could work.
And maybe the French hose.
Yeah.
Now you
For
don't
those-
wanna be forever known.
Well, you never know. For those who don't know, my novelty act is I play 14 feet of standard 5/8 inch garden hose duct taped to a 1 gallon galvanized funnel.
I have not seen this.
You have not seen this,
No, I
well,
haven't seen this one.
there are pictures,
You've got
and
to
I do a math and music talk,
Oh.
and it's to show that you could make a homemade French horn and it would act pretty much like on 8D. So I better pass on. No, I like your musical ideas,
Yeah.
it's better, yeah.
Just happen to have a picture.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, well, we have art.
Well, you can pass it around while Dory's
Okay.
answering your question so we can make sure we all see it. Medium?
I
or-
guess I'll go with medium.
Okay, you guys, good.
You've just received a prognosis of 6 months to live, but I feel pretty healthy. How do you spend your time?
Mm.
I don't know what to answer, but I've thought about it some.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you know, see Heidi being
Yeah.
such an example for everybody.
Absolutely.
And I think I just reach out and try to do as much as I could physically elsewhere, you know, and doing things for people as much as possible. And you gotta think, all of our days are numbered, and we should act like that, and get out more and do more than I do.
I do wonder how much Heidi's been an influence on all of us in this area.
Oh, thank you
Mhm.
very much.
Okay. What are you feeling?
She's
Medium.
gonna give a challenge.
Uh-oh.
But I am gonna answer the other question.
Uh-oh.
I grew up in a Church of Christ, non-instrumental. Now people say, oh, non-music? No, we were very musical.
Sing a lot.
And there were, at Church of 95, there were 20 high school, college age. And we sang our hearts out. And we all sat together, and I sat with the altos so I could learn how to do altos. And when we traveled, there were 4 kids, mom and dad. Mom brought her pitch pipe, had it in her purse at all times. We had 2 songbooks underneath the seat, and we had all 4 parts. We sang our way all the way to California and back. We were traveling, and when she passed, I got that pitch pipe.
Oh, that's great.
That meant a lot. Oh my gosh. You get to relive one day in your life before you die. Which one would it be?
That's interesting, because you can think of it as 2 ways.
Mm-hmm.
You want a do-over,
Right.
because it's so
Right.
you wanna relive it.
That's really thoughtful.
It is thoughtful.
I'm not that thoughtful. No, I would have to say it was the day that I had Marissa, because I had her in the car by myself, and it was God in me, and that was precious, precious, precious. And I swore up and down the pregnancy was, I had 2 girls, and I swore it was a boy, and I couldn't look. I had to wait for the nurse to tell me it was another girl. Didn't have any girls' names picked, but that's what I would. It was precious.
It's a really big one.
I'll do a medium as well.
Oh, man. Have we
But we
all-
gotta hear examples of the easy and hard.
Who doesn't love a good eulogy? Start yours today by sharing one piece of advice for those left behind. Jeez.
Oh my, that's an easy, it's a
I
medium.
actually have mine written, so.
Do you really?
A little bit, yeah.
Wow.
My parents had theirs done before they were 40.
Wow.
I mean, they kept modifying them a lot.
Mine's
But-
about intentions on how I want to be remembered, so they're not
Yeah.
necessarily the accomplishments and stuff, but it's
Right.
about what I want to be remembered, so I'm writing it.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to start thinking about that. My
Do you want
son-
to
We could go around the room and do yours.
Huh?
We could go around the room and do yours.
One activity I would do with my speech and drama students was called the exaggerated eulogy, where they would swap names anonymously, name out of hat, and they'd have to write something just as funny as possible but identifiable about a person, and we'd try and guess who they were talking about. It was really fun. Do you want to try a different card?
Oh, sure.
Okay, medium.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I think writing my own obituary is blank.
You're gonna have to do
I
this.
get three choices.
Oh, there you go.
Helpful, nobody knows me like I do. Conceited, let my loved ones decide what to say. Morbid, why would I do that?
Okay.
Probably A, helpful, nobody knows me like I do.
Yeah.
Good.
Alright, I'll take a difficult one just to try it out here.
Wow.
Because you're letting me
Yeah.
get a second one, so it's terrible.
Great.
This is what Jess thinks is hard.
Have you ever been with someone while they were dying? How did you feel? And I do get some choices. At peace, they seem comfortable, ready to let go. Disturbed, it's a visual I'd rather not have. An unknown, I'm not, and would like to keep it that way. So I actually spent the last week with my mom as she died in our living room from cancer. It's none of those choices because it was very, very hard. But I'm so glad I was there. And I was working, Bruce was taking care of the kids back home, and it was a Sunday, and it was time for me to decide. Again, this was one of those that could be the next 5 hours, it could be the next 2 weeks. But I hung on because I didn't want to miss it, and she hung on a long time. And those who don't know, my mom was a nurse and very practical woman, but when it came to her own death, she never admitted she was dying. She didn't make a single funeral plan. She left not a single note behind. So, but she did manage to do it her way. So, and Dad was able to take her home. So I'm glad I was there. I felt sorry for my brothers who were not able to be there. And I think they've asked many times about it, so I would have hated to miss it.
Think I'm gonna go easy.
You played this game before.
I have. Oh, wise one, talk about a person in your life who you would consider wise. What wisdom have you gained from them? This is a hard question.
She tricked you.
You all should have sorted these cards, or I should have not sorted them. And just like,
That should have just rolled off the tip of my tongue, Jess.
Exactly. Good advice.
Deb had to remind me that was the right
That's why it's easy.
Oh man, yeah, and I would say that Jess's discernment is such a gift. Her spidey sense relationally is just always on.
Okay, thank you.
It's probably more painful for me to talk, to Jess, for me to talk about how wonderful she is than it is for me. So, thank you. I'll hang on to this one for later.
Yeah.
I'll try difficult.
Okay.
Ooh.
What scares you the most about dying? A, B, or C? Fear of the unknown, the pain of the process, it happening too soon, and it's clearly B, the pain of the process. And I mean physical pain. And I guess just having lots of experience with people who are dying, that seems to be the height. A lot of them aren't afraid of dying, they're not afraid of the afterlife, they're just afraid of being in pain and their family members having to deal with that.
Yeah. I'll try a high one too. Share a profound religious or spiritual experience you've had. How did it change you or your beliefs about life and death? Well, I think I've shared this story in a couple different places, but my very first on-call shift overnight, I got called to a room of a lady who was in a lot of physical pain and experiencing a lot of like end-of-life symptoms. And she was waiting for her daughter to come, and I was sort of be there with her until the daughter came. So I was really scared because I felt a lot of expectation on me to comfort and to be who she needed in that moment. But she kind of flipped the script on me, and she prayed for me. And she prayed a beautiful prayer, and really sort of launched me into the ministry of chaplaincy. And yeah, it showed me that, hopefully as a person of faith, even at the end of life when I'm in pain, I would have something still to give to other people, and that really was very meaningful to me.
Absolutely.
Very meaningful. Well, thank you all for playing with me.
Come over every Wednesday
come
night.
over.
The Daggers.
That was just to give you kind of a taste. I hope you'll think about buying one. I'm not a dealer of this game or anything. I will get no kickbacks, but even amongst my family and our children who are nowhere near, even thinking about this, they don't want to think about this. We've had great conversations about these things, and it's brought up a lot of good things. Okay, so we're moving towards the end. I don't know what time it is. I apologize, but I'm sure we are over time already. But I wanted to do a quick final activity, which I mentioned in the email. It's a guided imagery exercise in which we will visualize our own passing, just a little bit, nothing too heavy. The idea behind that is we're creating a mental picture of our ideals, so that we might, in that ideal picture, see some next steps that we might want to take to try and get as close as we can to that ideal. Again, acknowledging that many of those variables may be beyond our ability to totally control, but some things inside of there we may be able to control, so that's what we'll do. And again, I'm hoping to keep it light and just go as far as you're comfortable at any time. If you feel like this is making me upset or I don't want to think about this, just check out and do your own thing as we move on. So if you'll just close your eyes with me.
And this is your ideal?
Yes, but
passing?
it'll become clear as I lay it out. This guided imagery, just get comfortable in your seats and close your eyes. Find a comfortable position and take a few deep breaths. Inhaling calm and exhaling tension. Allow yourself to relax deeply and let go of any stress. Imagine yourself in the last moments of life in a place that feels safe to you. Very safe. Where are you? Are you at home? Somewhere else? Outside? In a hospital? Where is the safest place that you could be? Picture the surroundings around you. Are there any special items near you? A book, a blanket, a photo? What holds meaning for you? Visualize this item or items and notice how they contribute to the atmosphere of peace and safety. What do you hear in this moment? Is there music playing? Do you hear birds outside? Do you hear the gentle chatter of family or friends? Or do you find yourself in profound stillness? Allow these sounds to fill your awareness, and again, creating a sense of safety and peace. Are you alone? Or are there others there with you? If there are people with you, take a moment to focus on each person gathered by your side. Notice their presence and the way they are with you. How do they contribute to your sense of peace and safety? Let your mind gently focus on the reflection of your life. Is there anything that brings you a sense of satisfaction or peace when you think about your life? Feel the warmth of these reflections and allow them to fill you again with safety and peace and contentment. If there are any regrets that come to mind, acknowledge them with compassion, knowing it's natural to have mixed emotions. As you continue to breathe deeply, imagine a gentle light beginning to fill the room. This light represents the presence of God. Feel this divine presence enveloping you as you prepare to transition. And what is this presence of God like for you? Is this presence a father, a mother, a guiding light, or something else entirely? Notice the qualities of this presence. Is it nurturing, comforting, powerful, serene, or something else? Notice if God is speaking to you or making any gestures. Is he or her sending any messages or communication? How do you respond to the presence of God? Reflect on your emotional and physical responses. Do you feel peaceful or joyful, reassured or fearful or uncertain? Acknowledge and accept any response you have, whether positive or challenging. Remember that all responses are valid and part of your unique experience. Slowly begin to return your awareness to the present moment and open your eyes. Thank you for doing that with me. I've done that exercise in a few of my classes, and each time it's been a little bit different, thinking about that. Before that moment escapes your mind, I have a quick little sheet for you, and there's pens on the table. This is a worksheet that I don't mean for you to complete here while we're together. It's just a chance real quickly, if anything did come to mind about the guided imagery that you want to try and capture, you can write it down in here. But these are also some questions that later on, if you want to think it's a place for you to kind of process that. But if we could just take 60 seconds to write down, anything from the guided imagery that stuck out before you forget. I'm just gonna write them down.
Oh.
I got some more pencil.
I live here, I'll find it. That's good.
Where do we write about the guided imagery? Jess, you want is that the first question, or?
No, I think they all are.
Yeah, these are all about the guided imagery, but and you can answer them however you want to. And you can put the answer to this just initial feedback question anywhere on this paper. It's just a place for you to capture if there's anything that stuck out prominently to you during the exercise.
I like the question, how do you respond to the presence of God?
How did you respond?
Sweet. I felt good. It felt comforting.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's what we're hoping for.
I had an aunt that, she was passing away, but she was in and out. For some of the time, she saw a big glowing light and a wonderful green world, and she would describe it, and then she'd, go back to her son, be quiet, I'm here.
Yeah.
But then she'd talk and tell them about her experiences.
Yeah. I was with a lady not too long ago that similarly, Dory, she was passing and her family was there, and every time she fell asleep, she would when wake up, she would be disappointed. She was like, oh, I thought that was it. She was so cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yes, and these are questions just for your continued exploration. But does anyone else have any things from the guided imagery that stuck out to them before we close?
It was just too soon. I couldn't concentrate.
Oh, that's okay. No worries.
Do you want these back?
Nope, those are for you. Those are for you. So the last thing I have is just a list of resources that I've come across on my own learning. One is called, it's a website called Dr. Lucy Payne's Books, and it's actually put together by a hospice facility in the UK, but they just have compiled all kinds of movies and books and blogs that deal with aging, dying, and death. And it's kind of a hodgepodge of all kinds of things, but it's fun to explore if you're looking for a movie that you want to watch with some family members to get a conversation going, or just for your own viewing. Just a great resource. The other one is called The Conversation Project. It's also a website. They have some fantastic conversation guides. They are basically questions you can ask yourself to help prepare for a conversation that you want to have with a son or a daughter or a family member, something you know you need to communicate, either about a healthcare power of attorney form, or something about hospice, or your end of life wishes, or increasing needs in your as you age. They're just really great guides so that you can just have that first phrase on hand so you can start the conversation. The other one is a book I know many of you have already read, Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End, written by a very thoughtful doctor, and he just shares some great stories and perspective on aging. And then another book I know many of you have read, but it's a favorite book on reimagining our life with God as it interfaces with cultural norms, The Prophetic Imagination by Walter Brueggemann. So we think about aging differently, aging with a better understanding of how God impacts these decisions. He just does a phenomenal job of igniting the imagination, giving us permission to think about living in a different way. So I recommend that too. So here's the information sheet. and I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for experimenting, especially with the death deck with me. I thought it was fun.
You would.
I know, it is a secret, not a secret anymore, passion of mine, to try and get something like a Tupperware party going. Except it's about death and talking about and using the death deck, because I think it's so fun. But anyway, we'll see.
It's definitely something.
See if
that's
that
needed.
takes off.
Yeah, we'll see if it takes off. Maybe some of my early guinea pigs.
Don't invest your retirement.
No, okay. I will. Pastor Chris, would you mind closing us in prayer?
God of tenderness and strength, we thank you for your presence with us in places where difficult conversations happen and in places where we find it difficult to speak. In places where we are surrounded by loved ones, in places where we feel so alone. In this difficult topic, we know that there are tender spots in the hearts of every one of us in this circle. For we have loved and we have lost, and we're mortal. And sometimes the feelings we have get overlapping so much that we don't know if the sadness is for ourselves or for the one who is dying that we love so much. But we know whatever the source, you are the source of comfort and strength and the beckoning force that calls us from life to life. And so as we leave this place, may we as friends and disciples go knowing that you walk with us even through the valley of the shadow of death, and we need fear no evil, for goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our life, here and with you. Amen.
Amen.